Hello there and welcome, and maybe even welcome back. We're going to continue talking about immersion today. Um, in this case and point, we're going to talk a bit more about immersion when it comes to voices, voice acting, um, speaking pieces, and what that means, and how you can find better ways and ways that work for you. I find that, well, you'll see it in a lot of the higher production value gaming casts and streams that the more creative, no, that's a bad term, the more actor skills that a DM and the players have, the more likely they are to change up the way they speak and have it consistent through their character so that you actually have a different engagement and you can start to form a different mental picture than simply the person in front of you. Now, a lot of this comes from taking, some people just have an inherent talent. Let's face it, it's like everything on the planet. Every skill, every ability, every thought, every action. Some people are a little bit naturally more gifted than others, but that doesn't mean that we can't all do it. It comes down to how you approach it very often and how you train and develop yourself in these abilities. I find myself over time that after practicing for a while and getting a little bit better at a few of them, that it comes down to breaking up the differences that you're looking to see. Finding where you have a little bit of an easier time doing something and starting from there and working on that so you can get that very well established and comfortable and able to work that into consistent everyday action. Well, not really, you know what I mean. Instead, then after that, you can start working on the parts of it that you have a little bit more trouble with until you can get a more flowing, dynamic, natural use of it. Now, some of it comes down to tone. We speak about tone a lot of different ways in different engagements. If you've ever trained a pet, for example, a lot of they talk about is the tone you use when you're speaking to your animal. If you've worked in retail, human resources, social engagements in any way, shape, and form, they talk about tone, perceived tone, implied tone, stuff like that, based on how you speak, the words you choose, impacting people's mindsets and initial takeaways, and how it influences them. So tone plays a major part in everything. It helps you broadcast the emotion and energy of a character very easily. Like if you have a aggressive villain, you can choose a firm tone to help set that. If you have someone who's a little more thoughtful, you might go a little softer in your tone. And try and find other ways of vocalizing the energy to not completely lose that, because it very easily does fall apart when you try and change your tone because you're projecting. Another thing I found is, well, your inflection, the choice of your cadence in your speech, and the words you use can play a major part as well. For example, you have people that speak very dramatically and try and have you hang on every word, no matter what tone they use. You also have those that emphasize certain words more than others so that you can still catch that they're someone worth engaging with, but you might not get exactly who they are. Or you might entirely get exactly who they are right off the top. So diction, pacing, tone, these are all things that we deal with every day, and it's not really hard to work in a couple playing with it at work, at the table, at home, at break. It's not hard to find ways of doing that. Usually the harder part is when you start trying to work in accents and well, catches, little things that help you differentiate that you're not from the region, or that the character here is different from the norm. So, in my case, I used to usually just go, I really like something that character does. And I'd like to incorporate that into my own work, my own play, my own actions. And I'll be honest, started off trying to do it all at once. And it doesn't really work out initially, because like the voice acting talent involved in a character, or the actor talent involved in a character, they've got a body of work that brought them to this point where they have that character. Some of them, it's a completely natural thing. It's who they've really been, but not always been allowed to be. For example, like James Spader when he presents Raymond Reddington on the Blacklist, or when he was Ultron, was basically a talk like you. That's all we're looking for. We want someone with that same thoughtful approach, with that same quiet menace that he kind of adds to his own voice when he's not the good guy, or at least not the clear hero of the story. But you have plenty of that. You also have people that have been working at it for years, and eventually they get to that point where they're told, yeah, just go for it. Then you have other natural voice acting talents, like, well, if he'd gone into voice acting, the guy from Police Academy who made all the sound effects would have been probably an amazing voice actor, because he was so good at mimicking and causing other sounds that no doubt if that had been more of a career option for him at the time, he would have succeeded dramatically, similar to Alan Tudyk nowadays can make a convincing chicken as much as he can make a convincing robot. That's when you start working on them individually, then you can take the time to bring it all together. So you can take dramatic speech where you try and have people hang on your words, such as certain characters in famous RPGs, like Arden in Final Fantasy 15, where he's a man of no import, no measure. I'm simply here for you. He draws you in with his words and also has you kind of hang on them, as you're also subconsciously going, this guy's up to something. I can't quite put my finger on it. I'm sure that there's going to be more here. And there's just the faintest hint of an accent to it, simply because, well, he's not a man out of place. He's a man out of time. So he speaks differently than most are used to. Some of that is in the choice of how he says things, which is a very important thing to use if you're ever doing historical or even dramatic play of anything from, well, SCA, Dark Ages, LARP, stuff like that, because people spoke differently. It's not that the engagement was different. It's just they spoke different compared to what we're used to. We've grown both closer together and farther apart as a species as we've gone on, and it shows in how we talk. It shows in how many slangs we have, how many choices and options of things to say the exact same thing we have, even in one language, let alone the multilinguistic options that are out there. So, tends to choose more complex, complicated words that most people don't use in the modern era of that world, same as not in the modern era of this world. You might have plenty of words that, oh, we have shorter forms of saying it now, so we go with that. But then you can also take something down the road after you've worked on that, where you can work on your accents and try and sound a little bit different without being completely off, where you're not going to change your tone and diction quite so much, but you can change the role of your voice. It's a combination of the tonality and the flow, just to accentuate certain words and letters differently, so you sound different. And on that, it allows you a little bit more play in who you are, compared to simply approaching diction and flow. but it's for a lot of people it's a lot harder unless you've picked up other languages, you've traveled. Um, that helps a lot, which is for some it's surprising, but when you stop and think about it, it's the exposure to other cultures, groups, and people, and listening to how they speak, and over time you'll flow more naturally into it. My mother, for example, has been living in Scotland for quite some time, and when we talk, after a while, she flows back into the normal accent and voice and tone for our region here in New Brunswick in Eastern Canada. Uh, it's every phone call starts off with a lot more roll and brogue and not quite bang on native Scots, but definitely not from where she's from because she's blended. It's natural. It's human nature. So you take something like that and that you've worked on, and you can combine the two after time. So instead of simply using a different tone of voice, you can also add some different flow so you understand what I'm talking to you about today. Perhaps you should not go that way, my friend. It may go poorly for you. As opposed to, perhaps you should not go that way, my friend. It will not go that well for you. Or, there's trouble that way. You should watch out for yourself if you follow that path. But when you've learned them, you find a couple hitches and clicks, and eventually you get to the point where you can bring them more naturally to the fore because you've done it a few times. I couldn't do the okay, or in some case, some people say it's pretty good, but I've always mentally castrate myself over anything that I say and do wrong, so anytime I slip out, it's a problem. But I couldn't run with the voices that I'll use in our LARP and tabletop games. If I hadn't crawled with some really, looking back, some really poor but at least tried to be consistent attempts at different accents and voices. So instead of "Hello, I am Stefan Lery of Clan Toyador. I am an artiste. I work on carpentry and woodworking skills. I would like to do some work for you," is leagues better than when I started with that same voice. But without stuff like that, and who do you think you are type of acting where it just worked on tonality and cadence, allowed me to do things like, "Brothers and sisters of the Sabbat, we are gathered here today in the light of our father Cain, the Dark Father, he who cast off the original shackles of slavery, to do the same, to look at our elders and those around us and laugh at the weakness of the Camarilla as they enslave themselves to their elders, as we instead choose to revel in our bravery, our brotherhood, and our freedom. We'll burn the tower around them and watch them weep tears of ash and blood." It's a bit of a difference. But when you start combining them and you get to practice, you get the option of doing that. And that leads to a lot of immersion can come from that on its own. For example, you could walk into a room dressed in your normal everyday attire, and once it's time to play, just changing your voice changes the entire feel. It lets other players and characters and everything get the feel, and sometimes it allows them also the freedom to try themselves, knowing that someone is doing something, and that allows you to lose a bit more of yourself into the character, falling more into the role, the scene, and engaging with it. And I always found, in LARP and tabletop, that makes a big difference because we're doing a lot of this as escapism. Like, we're trying to be different people and different roles and different acts. Sometimes it's empowerment, sometimes it's experiment, to just find something different. To set yourself free of your normal mundane concerns. And, anything that helps you engage, anything that helps you find yourself is a plus for me. And Honestly, these are things that now more than ever, well, they're always, well, you could view a lot of them as hobby skills, hobby abilities. A lot of them help in our day to day lives just because knowing tone, knowing cadence, knowing vocal helps you interact with people better. It's I've found sometimes that taking a moment and stepping back, that approaching it with a different me verbally alone has a different impact on a situation. It's it's nice because it allows you to be you and find more ways of doing things. Um, but also with a lot more of our, work from home and other engagements, as we're continuing to be a more and more online, socially networked, at a distance group, there's more opportunities for people willing to do voices, people able to do voices. And we're not just talking, your blockbuster roles like Pixar hiring someone who's 14 years old and has a trans experience or is of the gender they're looking for in their role and the experience they're looking for. There's also plenty of streamers out there who do video games. Like, if you're streaming a video game, doing your own voices and narration has a lot of connection with your fans. If you don't have a preset character personality for who you are on screen, it can make a big difference. You can give your people watching it something to latch onto and take away that might bring them back. But this is just one aspect of immersion. It's one that I've spent a lot more time on than some of the others because it's developing a skill that we all have some level of natural intake and talent for, but it wasn't always in my inclination. It wasn't always in my wheelhouse. And it's taken a lot of feeling like I can to get where I am today. And I feel like if you want, and you do try, that you can get here, you can get further, no problem. It just has to be something that you're interested in. And with that, we'll call it a close on this conversation. I hope that you enjoyed yourself, you had a good takeaway. It ran a little longer than I was expecting because I got a little tangential, I'll admit that. But I hope you're having a good day and having a good life. And be good to yourself. And we'll continue conversation on other topics on immersion soon. Thank you.